Welcome to the Bloomsbury Academic Podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Moravsky, and today I'm here with Jenn Pelly, the author of one of our 33 and a third books on the Raincoats self-titled album. So welcome, Jenn.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just to get started, you're a music journalist, so you write about a ton of different artists. Why did you decide to write a whole book about the Raincoats?
It kind of was just always on my mind. I interviewed the Raincoats in 2011 when they did a reissue of their second album, Out of Shape, and I remember coming out of the interview and thinking I would love to write a book about the Raincoats someday. They're one of the most important bands in my life. They've had such a huge influence on so much of like the most important music to me, and it kind of blew my mind that there was no book about them. So it was just an idea I had when I was 21 that I held on to. And the 33 and a third series, the proposal process was so like clearly outlined and accessible that it seemed like a way to write a book about the Raincoats. And that was kind of what I was after, is writing a book about the Raincoats.
Were there other considerations besides the Raincoats?
Well, yeah, I thought like what would I have liked to write a 33 and a third on, if not the Raincoats, and one record that I always think of is World of Echo by Arthur Russell.
Nice.
Which I think would be a very difficult record to write a book about. But yeah, that's kind of maybe if I were to ever write another book about an album. Maybe World of Echo, and they were label mates. Both of those records came out on Rough Trade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
We'll get into Rough Trade in a
Yeah.
minute. But you open the book with a line, "Mystery is costly." Why do you decide to open the book and contextualize the band this way?
Well, I thought about this a lot. Like, where's the line between like mystery on the one hand and then things like people just being sidelined on the other hand? And like erasure. And I feel like part of the reason I gravitated towards writing a book about the Raincoats was this element of mystery. Like, I knew that I related to the Raincoats record so strongly, and it felt like I felt really reflected in it, but I didn't completely understand. And that kind of like breach in understanding was like fascinating to me. I was like, I can relate to this, but I don't completely understand why. And I wanted to understand why. And I think maybe I also thought like maybe if I can understand why I'm so obsessed with this Raincoats record, maybe I would understand something about myself too. Yeah, so that kind of attracted me to it. But yeah, I do think that there's this idea of kind of romanticizing music that seems mysterious. But then it also felt like this real like something had been lost. I was like, why don't I know who these people are, or why don't I know much about them? They created this record that is so important, and so it just seemed it was like a priority for me to kind of like figure out who they were. And also so many people who I spoke with who were huge fans of the Raincoats, like Calvin Johnson and Carrie Brownstein and all these people from the Olympia music scene also told me that at the time they didn't know anything about the Raincoats. And I guess, it's a different time. You couldn't just email someone and send them questions. But, and phone calls, international phone calls were expensive, I also learned. So, yeah.
This might be a hard question to answer, but do you feel through the process of writing the book that you did understand something deeper about yourself?
Yeah, I think so. I feel, I definitely feel like the instinct of, I feel a part of myself in this record was very like validated by the process of working on it. And I think I understood a lot of why, like like, why do I like art that kind of celebrates things that are wrong, like mistakes and scrappiness and like rawness and like vulnerability. I think I like kind of learned something about myself by trying to like investigate why those things matter to me. I talk in the book about this idea of raincoats logic that I kind of realized is very useful just when thinking about like any kind of like conundrum in your life, like on Fairy Tale in the Supermarket, which is now the first song on the record. It actually wasn't included on the record when it was originally released in 1979. There's this lyric, "No one teaches you how to live," which I just think is this really beautiful lyric, and it's so true. People are making things up as they go along in life constantly, and so in a way, it's kind of like it's like a DIY mantra or something. Like, no one teaches you how to do it; you just do it yourself. DIY, whatever. But it also is really useful just in general. Like, people are constantly faced with situations and dilemmas that they can't figure out and just have to improvise. I'm not sure how I got on this tangent, but it's it just raincoats logic has become like such a strong concept to me.
Yeah. You have this great line. It's one of the best in the book for me. Is you say that shakiness begets life or something like that, and I was just like, damn, that really spoke to me as well.
It's so true,
right? Like, life is messy, and being around other people that allow you to have the space to explore what that means is crucial.
It was that, I feel like that line I wrote at a time when I was really applying raincoats logic in a really maybe in a really way that felt very useful, but I was like just kind of, dealing with the situation where I didn't know what was going on, and I was so confused, and like it was more of like a personal life thing, and one of my friends was like, but you need moments like that in your life. And I was like, everyone needs moments of shakiness. It's totally true. Like, you literally can't move forward without scenarios like that. And it just kind of made me hear the shakiness of the raincoats in a different way.
What was it like actually interviewing them? What was your research process?
It was so fun. I kind of like didn't know what to expect at all. I didn't know them like before I pitched the book or anything. I had interviewed them once and I'd seen them play a couple of times, but I just kind of reached out to them because going into it, my ideal scenario would be to like interview them thoroughly, do like a ton of research. I didn't like necessarily want to write like a first person account of getting into the raincoats or anything. Right. I wanted it to be kind of like just, fact-based history and criticism. So it was a priority for me to interview them if I could. And so in 2014, which is when I started working on the book, I emailed them and I decided to go to London and interview them in person, which I didn't like have to do, but I just figured it would be better and
creates rapport,
a great excuse to go to London.
Exactly.
And so I went to London and interviewed them. I interviewed Anna and Gina, and so Anna, the guitarist and singer, Gina, the bass player and singer, Shirley, who has been their manager and collaborator since the late 70s, and also the violin player, Vicky Aspinall. I interviewed all of them when I was in London, and going to London and interviewing them in person had like that kind of added benefit of when I went to their house and interviewed them, Anna and Shirley's house, and they had this archive of materials they had kind of saved and collected over the years. Like, they had basically just been creating their own Raincoats archive that they keep at their house. And they told me that I could use it for the book, which was incredible. And definitely it wouldn't have been the same book without having access to that. I just sat at their kitchen table and it was like stuff that had never been scanned before, like interviews and reviews from the music newspapers from the late 70s, and like pages that felt like they like could have might have like crumbled in my hands or something. And just all of this incredible ephemera. And they also had videos that they gave me access to. I mean, it's all this material that like should be in a library or a museum somewhere. And I felt so lucky to get to read all of that. And, you know, it was a pretty like wild process, like trying to make sense of all of it, because the press's like attitude towards the Raincoats in the late 70s was so
horrifying.
Like, well, sometimes it was horrifying, but it was just kind of like really either like very like hyperbolic praise, or like the most like scathing like sexist bullshit. Like, so it was really like the opinions were all very extreme. There weren't many like level-headed, like even-handed pieces. And of course, I write this in the book, but of course, like one of the few kind of even-handed reviews that is like, it's not for everyone, but it's great what they're doing, is from Starib, which was this British feminist magazine. But talking with them was so incredible. I really got the sense that they were like ready to tell their story, and like, I mean, they never stopped doing interviews or anything, but they were enthusiastic about it, which I feel so lucky for that.
And it almost gave your book this kind of zine vibe to have all of these archives in it.
Cool. Yeah, it was. I thought getting into all that stuff was so fun, and learning about like, I didn't know that the Raincoats actually published like their own zine in 1980. That was really cool to come across, and you know, it was just this moment where I was like, one of my favorite bands of all time published this zine in 1980 where they explain what all of the songs are about, basically, and I didn't know it existed. So stuff like that, I was kind of like, wow, it's so shocking to me that their history has been kind of not lost, but just surprised me. I kept being surprised throughout the process by stuff that had kind of been not necessarily buried, but not documented in the way it should have been documented.
Well, it's good that they were documenting it. It's almost like they anticipated that somebody would realize that, you know, they need this, or they deserve this kind of recognition, and that somebody would write a book about them eventually.
Yeah. And along the way, they had been working on a documentary about themselves for many years that I believe is still in process. But yeah, I think it is interesting, like a band that is so kind of like self-directed, to understand like we need to document what we're doing and keep things and archive it, because no one else is going to.
Right, especially in the context of herstory. Like, yeah, I mean, this whole, I guess Toby Vale of Bikini Kill did the same sort of thing, knowing that they would not necessarily be treated by mainstream media with the respect that they deserve, so they need to like write the history themselves.
Just kind of taking like the initiative to like create your own culture and make sure that it's documented. Like, I really something Toby told me was that when Bikini Kill was playing shows, they would like write the names of bands, like other women punk bands. They would like write the names down on like napkins and like on people's arms or something, just to like spread awareness of like this history that was like so underdocumented. But that was cool to learn about.
Yeah, I remember reading that in your book. I was like, oh man, pre-social media, just writing things on people's arms. I would have killed to have been alive at a time when Bikini Kill was playing, and the Raincoats, frankly. But
they're both playing now.
Wait, where?
Oh,
Bikini Kill's playing?
Oh, yeah. Well, Bikini Kill, they reunited this year.
I didn't know that. I'm clearly not in the loop, but
yeah. Well, yeah, it was so cool because now I get to tell the story.
Yes, tell me.
But there was an event that we did when the Raincoats book came out in 2017. We did a bunch of events at the Kitchen in Manhattan, which is this kind of like legendary avant-garde art space. Yeah. Arthur Russell was once the music director there. Kind of like anyway, the Raincoats have this history with the Kitchen because in the 80s they recorded a live album there called the Kitchen Tapes. And so the Kitchen had told them, if you ever want to do something here, there's like an open invitation. At least that's my understanding of it. And so when I was getting ready to release the book, they said, hey, like, do you want to do something at the Kitchen? Maybe you can like interview Anna and Gina. And so we did these 3 events at the Kitchen in November 2017 that were so special, just like one of the best weekends of my life. And there were 2 nights where it was more or less like me interviewing them on stage, and we showed films that Anna and Gina had made when they were in art school that were relevant to the time period. And Anna and Gina also exhibited some of their visual art outside. But then on the 3rd night, Shirley from the Raincoats kind of put together this event called The Raincoats and Friends, which she really kind of, it was her vision, or maybe the Raincoats vision too. So I was just going to read at it and do did I do a Q&A that night? I don't remember. But I read at it, and other people read, and there were performances, and they had invited all of these people to come perform, and they invited Toby Vale to come play a song. And they also invited Kathleen Hanna, but I think she had said like she couldn't do it or something. So I knew that Toby was going to be there, and I knew that Kathy Wilcox from Bikini Kill was going to be there, but I didn't know Kathleen was going to be there. And then
Kathleen showed up.
Yeah. So like right before doors open, like Vice Cooler, who's the drummer of the Raincoats, was like, hey, I have to tell you something. Like 3 members of Bikini Kill are here. And I was like, oh, Billy Karen came? That's so crazy. Who used to be the guitarist? Yeah. And he was like, no, it's Kathleen. And I was like, what?
I would have had a panic attack.
And I was like, what? And slowly, like, I think everyone started realizing, like, I think Bikini Kill are gonna, like, play. And they hadn't played since 1997. So, yeah, then they played a song. The song for Tammy Ray, and it was so wild. I mean, I was just kind of like in shock, but it was so beautiful because I think it was just the members of Bikini Kill wanted to do something to kind of express like their respect for the Raincoats and like how much the Raincoats mean to them, and so that was beautiful. And in January, when Bikini Kill announced that they were doing like a full-blown reunion, or playing a bunch of their own shows, which was very exciting. I've interviewed I interviewed them. I interviewed Toby Vale, and she told me like they were inspired by the fact that the Raincoats have continued to play, and kind of that they were inspired by the Raincoats to continue their band. And I'm sure there were many other factors too, but it was cool to me. Like it's interesting. I think the Raincoats have kind of at this point fostered this really interesting kind of like intergenerational conversation about music. The bands that they play with when they play now, and the people who have been inspired by them and who you know, especially because when the Raincoats started playing in the 90s, it was kind of inspired by the interest in their music from the Riot Girl generation and Nirvana and stuff. So it's just interesting to think about how everything is connected.
Right, and they're so symbiotic, like that connection that you draw in the book, that the Raincoats inspired the Riot Girl movement, but in tow, the Riot Girl movement sort of revitalized the Raincoats legacy and brought it over to the States.
Yeah, it's beautiful to think of how everything is connected.
Right, and on like a wider level, because all of those bands are so political, so intentional in their music and driven by feminism. Like, I don't know, I think it's also just like international solidarity in that way for leftist politics at large.
Yeah, totally. It's a cool way of articulating it, for sure.
One thing that you do a lot in your book is you describe the personal histories of each of the band members. Why did you decide to flesh that out, and why do you think it ultimately shapes the Raincoats as a band?
Well, it kind of like goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, which was kind of wanting to like demystify them a little bit as people. And you know, also like there's so many books about the history of punk. Like we know who all those men are. Like I don't have to even name them. Like we know who they are. They all have like memoirs and like multiple histories, and you can learn like every detail of like their lives. So I just kind of, it was fascinating to me to kind of like figure out who they are and where they were coming from. And I didn't know that like I knew that Anna was from Portugal, and I knew that Paul Olive, the drummer, was from Spain, but it kind of, I didn't know like how much they brought with them from those places. I didn't realize that that Anna was like growing up in Portugal and it was still like a fascist country. I didn't know that part of the reason Paul Olive wanted to leave Spain and come to London was to have like a freer, less oppressive existence. They both talked to me how like growing up in fascist countries made them want to live and work in a democratic way. Like Paul Olive told me like when she started a band, she started the Slits, that democracy was non-negotiable. And she also talked to me a lot because she kind of Paul Olive was involved with the scene around the Sex Pistols and the Clash before she joined the Raincoats, and she was like really turned off by a lot of it because they had these kind of like hierarchies in their bands where both of those bands had these like managers that were like dictating things to them. And she was like, I didn't leave this oppressive place to come do this. Like
to be told what to do yet again.
Yeah. So for her, you know, she made it very clear to me that not only did she want to be in a band where everyone's voices were heard, but when she I think you would hear that in the way she plays too. Like she's not dictating a beat when she plays. Her playing is more atmospheric and kind of like painting or something. It's just her expressing herself.
It's so joyful.
It's really joyful, and there's these beautiful clips of her playing with the Raincoats where she just has this like enormous smile on her face. It's so fun to watch. Paul Olive's such a special person.
I know. I mean, when you showed me those, or when you showed those archival videos of their old concerts, just seeing her like mouth open, freaking out on the drums, it was just, it was exuberant. I don't know.
It's really inspiring. It's like dancing or something.
And also just not self-serious. I feel like it makes music and punk music specifically like less intimidating to just see these women like rock out on instruments without being too concerned with the I don't know, with the mechanics of the music.
Yeah, I mean something she said to me like when I was first interviewing her was like, think about it, I did not know how to play the drums, but she kind of like reiterated that, and she was like, I didn't know how to play, so I was just making it up. And she was kind of like just exploring. She's like, I was just exploring the drums and trying to like figure out what sounded good and was fun. And she also like growing up in Spain, like didn't grow up like with a lot of like rock and roll. She was listening to like flamenco and like Spanish folk music and stuff like that. So she just didn't have this kind of like, and something else she said to me is like, I wasn't trying to be different, I was different. And I think you can hear all of that when she plays.
Absolutely. And you also write about, I mean, it was the democratization of their band, but I think they also were attached to this really amazing label, Rough Trade, which was super Marxist and kind of gave them the artistic liberty to do whatever they want.
Yeah, I had so much fun learning about and writing about the history of Rough Trade, because I think that the early history of Rough Trade is so fascinating. Like, I think there's like the label, like so much stuff happens later on that is complicated. But at the very beginning, it was so inspiring. Jeff Travis is so smart, and I was really grateful to get to talk to him a couple of times for this. But I think there's a lot to learn too from the idea, like, something that was really important to Jeff and Rough Trade was the idea of like taking back the means of production. Something that he said that I quote in the book is like not letting the marketplace like dictate like what the music that they released would sound like. And they're all kind of like I think they're just there are so many important reminders that I feel like the early history of Rough Trade like has to offer, especially now, like living through this like time where like the era of streaming and thinking about distribution, more or less the way music is distributed and how that affects the whole context of it. It seems like the right time to think about this similar conversation that was happening like 40 years ago.
I mean, yeah, I think a message that you drive home throughout the book is that they were DIY, and that was fundamental to their sound. I mean, what do you feel the state of DIY music is today? How do you think it affects the musical landscape?
It's hard to speak to like the entire state of DIY because there's so many different underground music scenes that exist concurrently around the world, and I'm definitely not aware of all of them, which is sick. But I mean, I've had so many beautiful music experiences in a DIY context, even just like in the past few months. So from my perspective, I there's always interesting stuff happening on an underground level, but I do think that there's, a band like the Raincoats, something that was interesting to me to explore in the book was how the entire context of their lives, like, allowed the space for them to make the music that they made, which includes the fact that some of them were living in squats and didn't pay rent, and, they worked sometimes, but for the most part, they had the time and the space to really, like, compose this music and practice it. So it was, like, simple, but it was they did rehearse, and they had the time and the space to kind of, like, experiment, which is not the case as much today. I mean, I'm sure that there are places you can move to where living is not as expensive and
as New York
time. Yeah.
Or London, frankly.
Or London or California or wherever, these places that used to be easier to kind of be an artist in. Major cities in general, it's very difficult. Yeah, I mean, it's, especially, like, I guess I could speak most being in New York, I can speak to New York, but there was a venue in New York called the Silent Barn that shut down last year.
I played at Silent Barn once when I was in high school. Yeah, sorry.
I was fairly involved and in booking things and performing and kind of in, I guess, underground music in New York in general for the past, like, decade. And there's always interesting stuff happening, but when Silent Barn closed last year, it really felt like one of the last spaces that really felt kind of like conducive to the type of like experimentation that I'm talking about. But at the same time, like in like, I guess it was in September or October, I saw a show at a bar called Windjammer that was like Ani and Lily from this band called Palberta, who I'm very obsessed with, and who I think also kind of like bear out the influence of the Raincoats in interesting ways. And some other bands played that show, like my sister's band Privacy Issues and my friend's band Preening, and this band called The Cradle from New York. And it's like seeing that show was so incredible and so inspiring. So seeing a show like that, I'd think like, music is so great in New York right now. Like, there's no problems. Everything's, God, like, it's a very complicated conversation around music venues and gentrification, and would require probably another podcast to get into. But I don't know if there's interesting DIY scenes out there somewhere. Email me and tell me. I want to know.
Totally.
I know there are. I was also inspired to start like a kind of like performance project while I was working on the Raincoats book.
Oh yeah,
which is another subject. But I feel like through that I went on a tour in November and played DIY venues in Atlanta and Nashville. And
what was the performance project?
It's called Abandon, and it's me and my sister and our friend Steven. It's fairly like offline, which I love. But when I was working on the book, I kept thinking like, I was writing about these people who were Anna and Gina who were performing for the first time. And it's really hard. I mean, I think it would be kind of impossible to write a book about the Raincoats and not be inspired to start a band or a project. I'm not really sure like if that would be possible. So in a way, I feel like it's a testament to the power of like their music and their story that I felt compelled to start a creative project with my friends while I was working on it. And I was really curious about like I write a lot about what it feels like to be at the beginning of something, like the beginning of discovering yourself as an artist. And I really wanted to, almost as like an experiment, understand what that felt like. And because of the existence of Silent Barn, and I think because of my proximity to all of this information about the Raincoats, it was almost inevitable, I think.
That you start a project.
Yeah. But it felt like it really informed the way I was thinking about their music, too, a little bit. And so I was grateful for that.
Yeah, I love thinking about that. I mean, I thought about that as I was reading along, that it must have felt like a sort of a meta experience for you writing this and getting inspired to write your own music, but also your whole experience writing a 33 and a third.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, no one teaches you how to live, and I had never written a book before. I mean, I had done a lot of like long form journalism, but I had never written a book before, and I was 24 when I started working on it. So I had a lot to learn in some sense. I mean, I was ready to do it, but with writing a book, it's kind of like, especially writing a history book, I'm not sure if anything could really prepare you for the kind of like kind of undertaking that is when you start doing it for the first time.
It all kind of reminds me this other part in the book where you say that the whole concept of the Raincoats was an act of resistance. What do you mean by that exactly?
Well, I think like the Raincoats are like a threat to the status quo of music. Toby Vale said something similar to that to me when I was talking with her about the Raincoats earlier in the year. And it felt like a really beautiful, like succinct way of expressing why the Raincoats are an act of resistance. But you know, they have specific songs that are more political, but I really do think it's kind of the totality of like the Raincoats as a band that feels like an act of resistance, because they kind of just, they allowed their art to be a reflection of who they were, and it's not polished, and there's a lot of freedom in that. But yeah, I think it really is the kind of allowance of imperfection. I think is, to me, what makes it an act of resistance, because it's so like perfection in general is this kind of disease or something. It literally is disease, the idea of perfection, and especially the way that it affects young women. So I think creating art and reflecting yourselves in a way that is scrappy and kind of messy, and you know, they had to like make mistakes in order to go somewhere, in order to like move forward. And I think that's a really valuable lesson. Like, you have to make mistakes in order to go somewhere you haven't been before, probably. And I think in general, like, there's this like cultural myth that, at least in mainstream culture, that people don't make mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially with women, I think I don't know, how do I articulate this? Just, I think there's obviously an insane amount of pressure to be perfect at all moments, and we don't ever venerate failure, and it's in the things that we learn in those failures. I don't think, especially as women, like, we resist the idea.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I feel like like when I was saying earlier about like things that I feel like, I was like, maybe if I could figure out why the Raincoats, I gravitate so intensely towards it, maybe I would like learn something about myself. And I think there is so much to learn from that.
Yeah, I mean, because it's interesting. They're not explicitly political in a lot of their songs. They are an off-duty, like when they're talking, when they're talking about like a specific political instance, and yet they are so deeply political. I mean, with songs like Lola, for instance, you go into that a bit into the book. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, they do a cover of Lola where they don't change like any of the pronouns in the song. So there are lines where, you know, it's 3 women singing about how they've never kissed a woman before. And there are so many people who I've spoken to who told me like hearing a punk song of girls talking about kissing other girls just was like very like affirming and liberating for them. Like, I talked to Patty Schemmel about that from Hole, and I talked to Rachel Aggs from the band Shopping about that. And yeah, I feel like that song in particular, like, is like the best known Raincoat song we're recording, probably, because it has like more of a beat to it or something.
Right.
But I think that that's like the best version of that song by far.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I think that the original, I think you said this too, is like vaguely transphobic, or, you know, it could be interpreted that way.
Yeah.
And the fact that they abstract it this way does feel more intimate. It feels like, I don't know, there is something just so revelatory. I growing up listening to this about girls kissing girls, and there not being an issue with changing the pronouns was really important to me personally. Yeah,
I agree. I think that I just like how they complicate it even more. I think it kind of, there's just this extra layer of freedom or something there through that. Yeah, I was so glad that I got to interview Rachel Aggs for this book.
Oh yeah,
one of my favorite musicians.
Why were you so happy?
Well, I think Rachel is like, she's someone who I know has been very inspired by the Raincoats throughout her musical life. And Shopping is one of my favorite current bands. And I really liked the idea of interview. She's my age, like 30. And I liked the idea of interviewing someone who was kind of from a different generation. And yeah, her music is so like I think kind of like free and nonlinear in a similar way. Sometimes when she plays, because she always like has this huge smile on her face when she performs, that reminds me of Palmolive a little bit. Even though she's a guitarist. I've been thinking a lot about the Raincoats legacy, because the record just turned 40. And I sort of feel like their story to me feels like there's so much like potential, like there's so much creative energy in their story, like just the fact that they composed songs like with no rules, but like they really compose songs with no rules. Like people say that, but like you listen to their songs and like a song like No Looking is just kind of operates by its own logic. It's like a story and then they're shouting and it's a story again and they're shouting and it kind of just speeds up and slows down. Like I think it's really kind of liberating to listen to the record and kind of imagine or remember that like a song can be anything you want a song to be. And I remember I look at Goodreads sometimes because like I can't help it, like seeing like people who read the book and like what else they're reading. And I saw someone had just read it and was also reading The Artist's Way, and I was like, oh, that makes so much sense, because I feel like even though it's a book about a band from, most of it takes place in the late 70s in the UK, like it really does feel like their story could be inspiring and like invigorating to just artists in general. And it's been cool to see the book resonate with people in that way. Like I remember shortly after it came out, this visual artist posted about it on Instagram, and I think it said like some of the best books about art are books about music or something. and I remember thinking, oh yeah, like I don't think you really need to. I mean, I would hope that people are familiar with their music, but I don't really think you need to be familiar with their music to like be inspired by what they did and what they continue to do. I had a friend who was in art school who read the book, and she was like, oh, I've been telling everyone in art school to like buy this book because I do think that their story kind of, or the way that they operated, at least it unlocked something for me where I was like, anything could be like you really can do whatever you want. There really are no rules.
No one tells you how to live.
Yeah, no, totally. That applies to composing songs or having the confidence to compose a song, but then also just like what you put into a song too, or a piece of art or anything. That's something that I remember Anna told me that while I was interviewing her, and I think it's in the book that, or maybe actually it's something she writes in the Raincoats booklet, the little zine, is that the Raincoats were a group of people who had like just enough confidence to do what they were doing, like not much confidence, but like just enough, which is so inspiring. Sometimes I feel like it's more inspiring to hear people working when they have like just enough confidence rather than like a ton of confidence. Like obviously it's powerful when someone is very like brash and bold and like just kind of like not hindered by anything, but I also think it's inspiring to see people who maybe almost couldn't do what they're doing, like just had like that kind of just barely crossed the line. I feel like that's inspiring in a whole different way.
Totally. I think that resonates. I think that's why it resonates with so many people, whether they like this kind of music or not, right? Because there's something so human about that vulnerability of like not even being that good or just good enough to do what you want to do. It's like there's this like reach in their music that I think, I mean, it's kind of like the shakiness, but it's like I think you can hear and like feel like the reach of them trying to do something that like maybe they don't know they can do, or figuring out if they can do it in real time. That is so beautiful to me and like poetic. Yeah. It sort of reminds me, there's this, one of the last lines in the book is so beautiful to me. The vibe of the Raincoats, you said it's a peculiar euphoria. It's a miracle. It's the rare sound of women destroying isolation together.
Yeah, it's so true.
Like, when I read that, I was like, yeah. In their failure, they felt less alone. They were destroyed because we're forced to be islands unto ourselves so often, especially like in a world of social media.
It's so true. Yeah. And I think, you know, like talking about the power of togetherness, is easy, but like when you can feel the power of togetherness and solidarity and experience it, it's just like unlike anything else. It really is like I think the end of the record, like No Looking, when you hear them all like shouting together, it's just like my favorite sound in the world, basically, is like women shouting.
Me too.
Yeah, and it's definitely you know, writing a book is a very isolating process. You spend all this time alone, so it was very like, it was comforting to have this like reminder while I was working on it too.
Did you do some of your own shouting afterwards?
Did I? No, but I would. It's funny, the project that I started, inspired by the process of the Raincoats, is kind of spoken word. I like to shout at karaoke.
Shouting figuratively
shouting, yeah, lots of figurative shouting.
Well, I think that's really all we have time for, but I hope that, I don't know, by us talking and giving the Raincoats the recognition that they deserve, that we've you know, destroyed isolation even further.
Yes, here we are, destroying isolation together.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
For everybody listening, you can get Jenn's book on Bloomsbury's website on 33 1/3. It's The Raincoats The Raincoats, their self-titled album. Thank you so much.
Thank you.